And welcome back. We're going to be covering Windows additions and features that are available in Windows 10. We'll sort of take you through some of those scenarios in which you get to see what exactly is in each feature as you're doing the installation. And the first slide we have covers Windows 10 additions, a number of different scenarios in which you'd want to actually deploy Windows 10. You have to consider what edition you're running, why you're running that edition, and what technologies are present in that edition.
Exactly. And so, for example, with the Windows 10 Home Edition, that's what most of us will use at home. There's not going to be a lot of companies that use Home Edition. But with Windows 10 Pro, you can get Windows 10 Pro at your big box store. You can get it at your retail store. You can even get it from your OEM. So for the exam, when they say, this is the hardware or you're going to use your OEM to purchase your devices, basically they're going to want to know, should you purchase Pro for education, Enterprise, education, right? It's all these different versions.
And ironically, what happens, you have to remember that many people are starting off running Windows 7 Pro. And so logically, the next step that they think about is, I need to go from Windows 7 Pro to Windows 10 Pro. But in the enterprise, when we're talking about taking advantage of the latest enterprise features, the most logical way to go is from Windows 7 Pro to Windows 10 Enterprise. So again, thinking about a move from the current version to the latest one, always focus on Windows 10 Enterprise as part of your solution.
Right, I tell all my customers the same thing. Yes, you may be using Windows 7 Pro right now, but you should be using Windows 10 Enterprise when you go to Windows 10. And we actually have a slide to show you some of those differences and the security features that you'll gain by going to Windows 10 Enterprise Edition.
Exactly. Windows 10 Mobile is another format that form factor that you'd want to consider. Windows 10 Mobile is typically for mobile devices that are going to be, traveling with you. If you have a 950, a 950 XL, those all run Windows 10 Mobile. Those are additions as well. They are just as much as an operating system as a full desktop or tablet.
And today, they're actually trying to make those the same edition, right? So I mentioned in the last video series that currently right now, Anniversary Update's the live version, the CBB version. We'll talk about CBB in just a few moments. But 1703 Creators Update's coming out really soon. My 950 XL is already updated to Creators Update as part of the Insider program.
So one thing to think about the exam is when they start talking about the LTSB, the
long-term
servicing branch. The thing to remember is there's certain things that aren't available in there. Even though they're running Windows 10, you don't get it to take advantage of things like Microsoft Edge, Cortana, for example.
Most store apps are not available in LTSB version. It's long-term servicing branch. And the idea there is you have a company that has ATM machines, or they have, it's working to manage one machine in the operating room or on the warehouse floor. So you have a machine that can't be shut down every, doing updates all the time. It can't be getting new versions of Windows every 6 months. So that's long-term servicing branch. It's meant for specialized systems. And by specialized systems, we mean they don't even have Office installed. There are some apps that you will get. You'll get like the Settings app because you need that. It's taking place with the control panel. But you don't get, as Alfred said, you don't get Cortana, you don't get Edge. You also don't get Calculator. You get a basic calculator that mimics Windows 95's calculator, but you don't get the nice, cool Windows 10 calculator.
Exactly. So some of those features are missing in Windows 10 LTSB, so know when to make a decision between just going with Windows 10 Enterprise and Windows 10 LTSB. Now, also things to remember is that you have to decide on the bitness or the bit version. So if you're going with 32-bit Windows 10 or 64-bit version, what are you looking for? Are you looking for memory? Are you looking for performance? So those are the other considerations that you want to think about as you're moving to the Windows 10 platform.
And just a last thing to consider is the hardware that it's sitting on. Because in this case, like I'm using a Surface Pro 4, and we also have a Surface Book device. Neither one of these will support LTSB versions. They only support Enterprise as a current branch of business version.
An example of this other scenario, we talked about the bitness. You might be in a company, or they might give you a scenario of a company that's running specific applications. A 16-bit application that it typically would have worked on a 32-bit system will not work on a 64-bit OS. So at some point, you'll have to consider whether or not you're going to upgrade that application to be much more relevant to what we have today, or you're going to just go with Windows 32, the 32-bit version of Windows 10.
But if you have a 16-bit application, I'm hoping you choose the earlier option to upgrade that at some point.
Exactly. So anyway, so those are some of those options you want to think about. We want to make sure that you understood what those are. Now let's talk a little bit more around the general features that are available in the Windows 10, both the current branch and the current branch for business. So we've listed out some of those scenarios here, starting with Cortana, which is the Windows 10 digital assistant.
Yep, it's our digital assistant. You can see the little screenshot on the right-hand side. It can tell you everything from the weather to your upcoming meetings, if you have conflicts. If you have in your location of a meeting where it is, it'll even tell you how much, based on right now's traffic, how long it's going to take you to get there, and maybe you should leave now. So Cortana has a lot of benefits even to the enterprise versions of Windows. And of course, Edge is our most secure web browser that we've ever produced. Recent tests from third-party companies have shown that it even has better battery life than some of the competing browsers, and it's more secure than the competing browsers. Continuum as one of the features, same experience across your devices.
Well, I really like Continuum, mainly because if you have a Windows 10 mobile device and you have the right connectors, once you plug in that mobile device to a monitor or screen, it literally takes that Windows 10 operating system and projects it into that screen, and you can use it as a full desktop. Right? It becomes sort of a full experience. So Continuum is also one of those ways of expanding and allowing you to use smaller devices within the office and then take that same device and have the data also available remotely.
Miracast as the next one. I wish what we had here behind us, instead of having this beautiful Seattle skyline, I wish we had a Surface Hub. And the reason why I wish we had a Surface Hub, first of all, they're really cool. If you haven't used a Surface Hub, go to a retail store and look at a Surface Hub. But also because I want to talk about Miracast. And what you can do with Miracast is you're going to a presentation and you bring your Windows 10 device to the presentation room. You can just Control-P, connect to a wireless display. You don't need to plug anything in. It's all wireless. And you can connect right up to that Surface Hub or whatever your display is that supports Miracast, and you can present your entire PowerPoint deck without ever plugging a single thing in. So that's Miracast. It's really nice feature.
So the other big feature that we see in Windows 10 is the touch, the ability to actually use the actual screen to input information. So both with the pen, and I have an example here of a pen where you can actually use that to do the inputting of information. If I wanted to change information on here, I can actually just circle it around, and I can actually erase information as well if I wanted to get things off the screen. The touch, the input is also an experience that we see with Windows 10. And another reason why a lot of employees are moving towards Windows 10 as a platform. They get to take advantage of those features.
It's really nice. I was in a meeting with my customer last week, and they wanted to see an example of inking, and I said, this meeting is giving us an example of inking. You have your employee using OneNote and typing her notes, and I have my salesperson with me using OneNote and handwriting his notes in OneNote. And so I said, we already see an example of that here between typing in notes or handwriting in notes.
Exactly. And then OneDrive as well is a free online storage. You can have either the OneDrive for business or the OneDrive, which is your own personal OneDrive that you use with your Microsoft account. Have those both synced, I have to say the word synced to your device so you can see your files, your storage, and make it available encrypted in the cloud itself. So that's another benefit of having Windows 10 as a platform. And lastly, we have sync your settings. So having data remain synced across multiple Windows 10 machines. So if you have a Surface Pro device and you have a Surface Book and you have another device, all of that data across those different systems can be synced across those platforms.
You can actually see on my screen right now, and I'm just showing you my actual laptop, my Surface, my Sync Your Settings. It's just in the Settings app, and you can just type Sync Your Settings and find a setting if you don't feel like browsing for it. And sync my settings on, and I want to sync my theme or my Internet Explorer settings, my passwords. I want to sync my language preferences, ease of access, and there's other Windows settings I can sync between my different devices, all using my same Microsoft account to log into.
And then we move on to more of the security features. So we talked about the general features that are available in Windows 10. There are also security features Joe mentioned one of them, BitLocker, a very important part, which actually sits in the TPM itself, and also device health. Device health attestation, which is basically a way to measure whether or not your device is booting up properly using some sort of, using the algorithms of determining if for some reason it's not booting fast enough, if it doesn't have the right encryption information. The device health attestation lets us know that the device has not been compromised. Secure boot allows you to, securely boot that system up.
It makes sure that any kind of malware or ransomware that happened to get into that system that might run at boot time can't run at boot time. Now, the thing about secure boot versus anything else on this list is it requires the UEFI BIOS, right? Again, the UEFI BIOS, as does the virtual secure mode, which is a little bit down on the list. So that does require UEFI. So that's one of the reasons why we want you to go to Windows 10 and we want you to upgrade your BIOS from legacy BIOS to UEFI to take advantage of secure boot. Once you have secure boot, you actually get other features available as well, which is on the next slide.
Exactly. So, and then on top of that, the multi-factor authentication, which is if you're in the industry or if you're in the exam, you might see it as two-factor authentication. It allows you to basically be able to identify yourself in terms of access to the device. It goes by those three components: who you are, what you have, and what you know. Right, so you might have your credentials that you can type in. Maybe you have your thumbprint that you're using some sort of thumbprint reader to basically validate that you are actually logging on, or you can use a PIN, for example. So the multi-factor authentication allows you to use more than one factor to actually access your system, and it enforces that with Windows 10. It's just another way to provide more security within the Windows 10 platform. We also take advantage of what we call the Virtual Secure Mode, or VSM, which is basically a way of storing information in a much more secure location on the operating system.
So as an example of VSM, and VSM works with the Hyper-V service, and Hyper-V is installed, or it's a feature that's available in Windows 10. Now, we know Hyper-V as running VMs or virtual machines that could be running Windows 7, even Linux, or Windows 10 versions. But what VSM uses is just the Hyper-V service. You don't need to have a full-blown Hyper-V installation. And it allows you to take advantage of a setting that we call Credential Guard and Device Guard. And Credential Guard, which again, we'll talk about that in the next slide a little bit, but Credential Guard takes your username and password that's kept in a hash in the LSA, and it moves it into that virtual secure mode so that ransomware and those types of attacks can't actually get to it because they're looking in the LSA for it. This virtualizes your credentials to prevent things like pass-the-hash attacks.
And the last feature we want to mention is just the virtual smart card. So if you ever had a physical smart card where you actually have to go into the building and put it against the scanner to actually let you in, we've implemented what we call a virtual smart card that actually allows you to use that same certificate or identifier on your device to access different resources. So it's another way that Windows 10 is providing a little bit more security on the platform when you're needing to access different resources with a secure card.
Now, some of the features that we're talking about are available in Enterprise Edition only, and some are available in Pro Edition as well. And Home Edition, for example, BitLocker is also available. We don't have a column there for Home Edition because, again, on this exam, they're not going to ask you about Home Edition, but BitLocker is available on Home Edition and Pro and Enterprise. And things like, Hyper-V can be installed in Pro as long as it's 64-bit Pro. But then as you go down the list, again, Credential Guard to secure against pass-the-hash attacks, or Device Guard, which will allow you to whitelist applications. Your device will only run trusted applications. And you can say all applications, as an example, that come from the Windows Store or come from my SCCM environment are trusted by default. And then I can use AppLocker to blacklist from there. Again, also available as Enterprise only.
So make sure you know the difference between what runs on Windows 10 Pro and Windows 10 Enterprise. What we've done for you so far is we've listed them out in this actual PowerPoint so you can actually see what those features are. Be familiar with each one of these because as you're going through the exam, they might give you a business scenario where they're expecting certain features to be available on certain platforms.
Exactly, and you need to present which platform it's going to work on or which edition should be installed for that scenario.
The next section we go into is really about installing Windows and understanding how you can do what we call a clean install, upgrade, Windows update, anything like that nature, that, or using just even boot from VHD, which are all options for installing Windows as well. We've already talked about the deployment requirements and how you actually get to it, but once you make that decision that you're going to install Windows, here are some of those features that we kind of start talking about. How do I actually do it? What switches am I going to use to upgrade to Windows 10? So we've listed a few of them out. Some of them are specific to doing a clean upgrade. Others are specific to warning you if there's a driver or boot driver that's needed, or requiring that there be no reboot during the process.
One of these that I like to point out always is the compat, the second one down, and then scan only. And what that allows you to do is actually run, we talked about upgrade readiness earlier, and we talked about Map Toolkit. It'll allow you to run setup on one specific machine, or even send this out as a command as long as you have some way to log it. But on that one specific machine to see if this one device is upgradable to Windows 10. I can run setup.exe, compat, scan only.
Exactly. So as you start that running process, right? So this is just a sample media. If I'm using a media-based installation, I run setup.exe /auto upgrade. It brings this window up and says, hey, do you want to upgrade your system? And it starts the process of configuring the system. You'll see it kind of walk through this screen of options, and at some point it actually does the reboot and continues forward to getting you to the latest version of your operating system.
Now, there's also ways to push out that upgrade, and it's entirely possible in some cases that you don't want to push out the latest upgrade as soon as it's available. We talked about how Creators Update is coming out really soon. Well, the day it comes out, you're not going to push it out to the thousands of machines in your organization. You're going to put some of them into what we call current branch. That means about 10% of your machines or fewer are going to get the newest version, while the other 90% or so aren't going to get it just yet. So here you can see that's all done through group policy. So a device itself is not considered current branch or current branch for business. The operating system that sits on it when it gets installed is when it's either current branch or current branch for business. We do plan to put out a new upgrade about every 6 months. It's not always the case. If you look at 2016, only one update came out then. 2 of them came out in 2015. There's 2 planned for 2017. That's typically what we expect, but it's not always the case. So Windows 10 releases do transition from one stage to the next, from current branch to current branch for business. It's just a declaration from Microsoft that says enough companies around the world are running this operating system at this version that we think it's business ready, and that becomes current branch for business. And again, you can decide either through Windows Update, which we're just getting to on that slide, either through Windows Update or through group policy, through SCCM, when that transitions to that current branch for business.
Again, you take a look here. It's not so much any different here. Here's where I'm actually going through the process of delaying and forcing the scheduling of the update. So Windows Update then does the exact same thing as if I was doing a normal update and delays it until I'm actually decided to do the upgrade. That just kind of shows you a quick process of what that looks like.
Now, these next several slides, or the next several clicks anyway, are what happens when we do upgrade from current branch to current branch for business. We can set it up through group policy in what we call rings, where we say, okay, these machines are going to get it within 5 days of its release. So let's make up a date. Let's just say May 5th, an edition is coming out. 5 days later, these few machines are going to get it. And then after a little while longer, we go with fast ring, maybe 10 days. And then again, slow ring, 20 days, and you can decide. And what happens with this is, one of the newest features to group policy with the Creators Update is, we can actually say, if something happens during this upgrade and something went wrong, then we want to delay all upgrades. So right now we know that everything's right, everything's working, so we're going to go ahead and then slow ring. And again, this is all still part of the current branch and eventually current branch for business. You can actually decide, if something was wrong, you can defer those upgrades through group policy as well. That's something new to Creators Update.
Exactly. So, I mean, I really like the fact that you can actually delay that. That saves a lot more time.
It does, because you've already set this up as 5 days, 10 days, but what if you can't fix all the problems in 5 days? Right? And by all the problems, I don't mean all the problems. I mean, you have a couple of drivers that aren't compatible, a couple of applications that aren't compatible that you weren't expecting to not be. Right? So you don't want to now push it out to your thousands of machines or even hundreds of machines knowing you have incompatibility issues. So we also don't want to modify all of your group policies, you just defer upgrades.
So for the exam, what should I be prepared for, Joe?
For the exam, before Creators Update, right? So again, that's the difference. So things are moving fast in Redmond. Depends on when you take the exam. So you want to keep track of all this. But what you should know is that in later versions of Windows 10, you can defer those upgrades for a period of time until you can get everything working and compatible again.
Excellent, excellent. No, that's good to know. So, and then the other two pieces that we want to mention as well is configuring what we call native boot scenarios, where you're allowing the boot to actually occur from a VHD or just a boot partition that contains the files required for boot with Windows 10. So here's an example of where we show in the command prompt, bcd edit -v, which is a verbose command, and you basically see the path of where that boot file is located. The boot mgfw.efi is the file that's being used for the extensible firmware interface to allow the installation. And it contains the system partition information, but things to remember. Disk management.msc gives you access to actually see the disk partitions on your device, and BCD Edit is the boot configuration designer access process that actually lets you see what you're running. It identifies what's running on the device, the boot manager, bootloader. These are things that you have to be aware of when you're dealing with booting an image up, right? Yep. And then lastly, we also have the what we call the native boot, boot to VHD. So if I were to take a ISO or a VHD, for example, I can, once I convert that ISO to a VHD, the VHD, again, is almost like a containerized version of the Windows 10 image, and I can mount it onto my disk as a VHD. So basically, you can either create one or attach it as a VHD, and what you can do is you can actually install the operating system on that VHD and attach it to a drive letter on your device.
Right, so don't think of this as Hyper-V, although it probably works with that in the background, right? But it's not. We're not saying install the Hyper-V service and then create a VHD and launch it in Hyper-V while your OS is running. We're saying to create this boot to VHD, mount it to your operating system, and then reboot to that VHD file.
Exactly. And so this is what it looks like. If you're opening up disk part, you actually see the different VDisks that you have attached. And here are an example of 3 different VHDs that are running Windows 10. Now, there are challenges to this because this might be a scenario where you're actually just testing it out on a non-production system, and you are a developer and you want to just test out different versions of the operating system. Once you have a secure platform, it's much harder to run different versions of the operating system simultaneously because of BitLocker and the fact that it's going to be scanning each one of the disks that are actually attached to that platform. So the upgrade process, again, is very important. We added a few additional informations around the language, making sure you have language options.
That's actually pretty important, right? So if you have US English installed on your Windows 7 device, you can't do an in-place upgrade to German language, as an example. The languages have to match. You can do the in-place upgrade to English and then change it to German, but you can't do an in-place upgrade to a different language.
Exactly. And then just remember, disk encryption might be another scenario that you'll have to consider. You'll need a disk. You need to be hooked on to a media, and it works okay with task sequences as well. So BitLocker is probably the most easiest way to kind of deal with this process.
Absolutely, because BitLocker will pause itself during the upgrade where third-party ones may not. So later versions of Windows do have ways around that as well, so make sure you're familiar with that.
So we wanted to make sure we reviewed just the installation requirements, not just the installation requirements, but the actual installation steps and things to consider when you're installing Windows 10. And hopefully this is helpful for you as you prepare for that process of running Windows 10 on the platform, as well as the additions and the features within it.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining us.